Be the person that breaks the cycle. If you were judged, choose understanding. If you were rejected, choose acceptance. If you were shamed, choose compassion. Be the person you needed when you were hurting, not the person who hurt you. Vow to be better than what broke you. To heal instead of becoming bitter, so you can act from love and not pain. Have a great day.
Good morning, everybody.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. So, whenever I get up here and I think, okay, what am I going to say? And I sit with spirit, and I kept getting one word over and over and over again. As again, I often tell you, I need the sledgehammer of the universe. Sometimes it isn't always subtle for me. But before I tell you the word, I was trying to think how I would do this. And by the way, hello everybody on Zoom. Sorry, Dan, for teasing you because I'm going to talk about teasing in a little bit. But I think the one thing I started thinking about, and a lot of times I do talk about self-love, because I really think it's just such an important thing for all of us. And so there was one thing, and I'm not going to have you raise your hand, but I want you to think about this. If I were to ask you right now in this entire room and everybody on Zoom, if you stand in front of the mirror in the morning, and I always say don't stand too closely, stand about 6 feet away. They say the 6 feet is about where people see you. And if you stood 6 feet from your mirror, can you say, I love you, and really mean it? Really mean, I love you to yourself. And if I asked you guys to raise your hands for those that can do it, I would probably bet that you would not raise your hand. And even myself, I struggle with that. To this day, I still do. And a lot of times I give you examples about myself. You know, it's not the Kim Caswell show here, but I give, not to be too intimate about sharing other people's stuff here, but I also talk about my clients that I get from QHHT working with hypnotherapy. And people, before they have a session, they sit with me usually for a minimum of 2 hours and they talk about themselves. And I want to know where they were born, what was their relationship like with their families, their siblings. In school, what was it like? Were you bullied? Were people unkind to you, or did you have a great life? Were you the sports person that had no problems? And now where are you with college and marriage and spouses? So before anybody goes into trance, I really start to get to know my clients. And I have to say, I love that part of this session because I really love getting to know people and really knowing the depths of them. But the thing that happens over and over again is I see what trauma and hurt, whether it's subtle or loud and major, how it impacts people's lives. And nobody gets out of here unscathed in our humanness. I'm also a person who believes that before we get here, that we have contracts with our soul groups. And I really see this over and over again. In fact, I had a client just this week on Friday. She came in and she was with her soul group near source energy, God. And she hadn't ever come to this planet yet. This is her first go around. And she's here to raise the vibrational energy of the planet. But when she was with her soul group, they each were going to give each other challenges that they could learn and grow from. And so one of the things that I found that I was hearing was projection. The word projection kept coming up over and over and over again to me. And I thought about projection and how it impacts our lives. So when you stand in front of that mirror and you look at yourself and really look at yourself, with or without clothes on in the morning, but stand in front of that mirror. And if you can't say, I love you, I respect you, I honor you, if you can't do that, then say to yourself, where is it in my head that criticism, that unkindness, that lack of worthiness comes from. Where does it come from? And I will bet you that it doesn't come from you. It comes from parents who didn't know better, who had their own issues. I had a father, I'll never forget the one time I said to him, I think I'm going to be a doctor. And, I was probably eighth grade. I was terrible in math. I had terrible teachers. I'm blaming it on them. But he looked at me and without a thought, he said, "You, a doctor?" And in that moment, the thought just vanished. I said, "I'm never going to be a doctor. I can't do it." He set my pace. Now, I'm not blaming my dad for my life. And I know as kids, we kind of want to blame our parents for everything. I'm a little too old for that right now. I've done a lot of work and gone within. But I remember it stopped me at that moment, dead in my tracks, saying, I could never be a doctor. I can't. I became a nurse, and I've done a lot of healing in other areas. And I've had wonderful teachers around me that have taught me. But I realized how much my parents impacted me. And I don't know about you. You probably, some people have wonderful parents, but sometimes they just don't always meet our needs and they don't always get us. If you got the B plus instead of the A, were you criticized? Or if you look at your peers in school, were you bullied? Did people come to you and just look at you and roll their eyes because you said something not unkind, but if you raised your hand to say something in class and people were looking at you behind and you knew those eyes were in the back of your head, kind of making fun of you? Or maybe as an adult, and this is something I learned very hard when I was in my 20s and 30s, I used to be very sarcastic. Of course, Dan, I'm sorry you got the brunt of my sarcasm as I'm starting to talk about this today. But I used to be very sarcastic. And as I've gotten older, I've often said I'm a little less funny. Or a lot less funny, because I thought I was very sarcastic. We would go out dancing at 2 a.m. We'd go to the diner. We'd be imitating SNL, Saturday Night Live characters, and just harassing each other to death. And we had fun. But as we got older and my same group of friends continued to harass, they didn't harass me as much. I don't know how I got unscathed out of that. But I remember a couple of my friends within the group would get teased and teased and teased and teased. And one day it hit me. In every sarcastic statement, there's that thread of truth that can be hurtful. And we have to really be mindful of how we say our sarcasm, because it can shape the way the person sees themselves. So as we go through life, we see that the people around us are the ones that have oftentimes given us our ego integrity or our lack of ego integrity. When you look in the mirror and you see that little wrinkle, that little pimple, that little something you don't like, oh, I don't like the way my neck looks over here. There's always going to be someone prettier than you and less pretty than you, more talented than you in some ways and less talented than you. And you are the most amazing, beautiful, unique you. There's no other like you. And if we are being spiritual people, we know that there is a God. Sometimes I call it source or source energy. But this energy has given us this incarnation. And everything we do here is a lesson. When we wonder what our purpose is, part of the purpose is just to continue to learn. And I have to say, I can't believe you had this, Gary. This was wonderful. Because that is what it really comes down to. If you were judged, choose understanding. That is your lesson. You can choose to pass on how you shape other people's egos. You can be kind. How many times do we see just the simple words, be kind? And so if you were shamed, choose compassion. Don't pass on what you had in your life. I encourage you, because I know we are all loving beings. And still maybe in the car, sometimes when someone cuts me off, I am going to go, But I really think that when we do this and when we look at ourselves, we have to look at the source of why we don't like parts of ourselves. And really, it's not coming from you most of the time. And when you think about it, have you ever sat there and done something what you think is stupid, and then all of a sudden, I will say to myself, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that? Where did I? Would you talk to a friend like that? Would you tell your friend, oh, you're an idiot? I can't believe, and I would never say that to Leslie, but I can look at her because she's a dear friend. But, like I would never ever do that. I would say, oh, are you okay? Was it a bad day? What happened? How can I help you? And that's what we need to do for ourselves. We really need to do that for ourselves. And even some of this in my line of work, shame and guilt can be carried over in lifetimes. And I do believe in reincarnation because that's what I do in my past life regressions. And I have seen horrendous shame and guilt carried forward so that from other lifetimes, people thought they did something very terrible. And part of my job as the practitioner and the facilitator in this is to show people that they are not terrible, that they made the only choice they could at the time, and they acted the way they did, and they don't have to carry that shame and guilt forward. So when you look at yourself today, honor yourself. Next time you look in the mirror, or even if you don't look in a mirror, sit quietly with yourself for a few minutes and really meditate on the good parts of you, the parts of you that are kind and giving. Some of you have given life to children, and you've been wonderful parents and done a beautiful job. And yes, maybe there are times there were things that you did, you felt you could have done better. You're human. You're still a loving, beautiful person, and you can still show kindness and caring. But start with yourself. Go inward and spend even 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and close your eyes in quietness when you're by yourself and think about how amazing you are, because you are. And so many of you, if you could only see what I see, I think you are amazing. You are such giving, caring, loving people, good moms, good friends, such good, gifted people. So, on that note, I really wish you a beautiful day, and I hope you find it all in here. Namaste.